what's going on, people? My name is Mo Gilligan. You're listening to the Mo Gilligan podcast. So, my guest that joins me today is someone I met very recently, and now I feel like I can call a friend. And she's someone that growing up I would watch, and also someone I've recently just learned a lot from. A really good person that is amazing at their craft, takes it very seriously, but also is just a nice person inside and out. So, welcome to the podcast, Davina McCall. How are you?
I'm good. Mo, that's like, I was a bit like, really? That's so nice. Like, wow. And my favourite bit is like, I could call her a friend. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, great.
It would have been awkward with that. And I feel like I called a friend and they're like, I don't know you like that. You know?
No, it's really nice.
Yeah, well, the thing is, this pod is about giving people their flowers. That's pretty much what this pod is, you know. I get a lot of people on the pod who I just admire, people I've met, people's journeys that just inspired me somehow. So, once again, thank you for doing the pod. I really appreciate that as well.
It was a no-brainer.
You know, so
like,
thank
you called,
you so
I was
much.
like, Mo, yes.
Yes, yeah. So I thank you for that. I really,
you know,
really appreciate that.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
I don't do many podcasts.
Yes.
Because they're very dangerous.
Okay.
Have you done a lot?
I've done a lot, mainly for... Sometimes it's weird because sometimes I'll do a lot if for example, I've got like a tour or something happening. So it is good for promo, but it's also, I like doing it at different stages of my career. So sometimes there is a lot to talk about where I really want to talk about that now while it's still fresh in the memory than talking about it in a year's time.
Do you not say things that get you into hot water?
Not really.
Oh God, I'm so loose-lipped.
But you can be very comfortable on a pod though, innit?
Yeah, you get way too comfortable.
Yeah.
You think, oh, it's just me and Mo, like having a chat. And then you say something, it's front page Daily Mail. You think, oh, how did that happen?
And then before...
Do you know, I've got a good story to tell you.
Yes, go on.
So I did a podcast kind of before podcasts, like 3 years ago, before they really went mega.
Yeah.
And it was with this lady called Jo Elvin. She's now the fashion editor of You magazine. And I've known her for years and years and years. And she was doing this podcast with a guy. We sat down, similar setup, but without all the cameras. It was just a tiny microphone on the table, and literally just forgot it was there.
Yeah.
And I was with friends having a chat.
Yeah.
And they said, have you ever DM'd anybody famous or like tried to message anyone famous? I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, who? And I went, The Rock.
Yeah.
And I was like, I literally love Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
He seems like such a nice person.
Yes, yeah.
All the things that you like, I think, knowing you a bit.
Yeah.
You know, he's got an amazing work ethic. He's really lovely to everybody.
Yeah.
He feels like a good person inside and out. He's a family man.
Yeah.
He's, he's got great like he's just everything, and he looks like a monster. Like he's amazing. And I said, can you imagine going out with The Rock? Like you'd be using pickaxes to kind of scale up his thigh, and then climb up his chest to kiss him on the lips. And I said, I keep thinking he might see my blue tick, but he never has. And I kind of just message him and go, just to let you know, me and my kids love you. We think you're such a great actor, but we know you're such a nice person. And he never messaged me back, but that's okay, And that was it.
Yeah.
It turned into Davina is secretly messaging. This is just after I'd got divorced.
Yeah.
Secretly messaging Dwayne Johnson. Secret messages, Davina going out with it, to the point where it got discussed on This Morning.
Yeah.
Then
What?
they got Dwayne Johnson on This Morning to do me a message. And it was a bit tragic, like poor 50-year-old Davina, newly divorced, a bit sad, trad woman, madly in love, like pointless crush on Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed, but quite pleased at the same time. And Radio 1 with Greg James did get me to play rock, paper, scissors on a sort of Zoom chat with Dwayne Johnson. That was the...
So you got to meet him?
That was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, bucket list, done.
Yeah. That's dope though,
So
man.
that was from a podcast.
Yeah.
I was going out with Dwayne.
But you know what's dope about that is that it turned around to being something that automatically, when you're in that public space where you see something and you just said it in gist, and then it's got turned negatively and you're like, whoa, I didn't mean like that. Then it goes full circle and goes positive. That's quite a really interesting take, man, because that doesn't happen a lot.
Well, often the negative, sometimes the negative happens and then you can't be bothered to correct it. You think, oh, whatever, You know, that must happen to you as well, right? Something
Well,
comes out in the paper and you think that's not quite true, but I can't be bothered to correct it.
Yeah, I think for myself, I've not really reached that space of seeing, articles in the news about me. There's been times where it's like, oh, we're gonna write this story, and already I'm like, whoa, but that's not true, or like sometimes I go on, I don't Google myself because everyone will say Google yourself.
Never Google.
But sometimes you just like you're like, oh, let's see, man,
I once woke up and I looked on Twitter and everybody hashtag Davina was trending. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Like I've done something in my sleep. Like that's quite something even for me. And it was from Selling Sunset. Have you heard about that TV show?
Yes, Selling Sunset.
There's a girl on there called Davina. She's a right cow. And she'd done something terrible in last night's episode or something, and it was all hashtag. So I did Google my name then. I Googled hashtag Davina, why is it trending? And then I saw and I was like, okay, that's fine.
I think it's like for me, like being in this space, because I'm like, for me, I've only really been doing TV at a time frame of for like 3 years. So everything is still very new to myself in the aspect of, sometimes things it's context. I was speaking to Dave, Santan Dave, which is a nice little plug drop sometimes. But I was speaking to him and we was at soccer and he was talking about context. And he was just like, it's so, sometimes what you say and people take, what they can take out of context is so important.
And I was talking to Mike about this morning. Intention, as well, is so important. Context and intention. Like you might say something, but when you see it on paper, you can't feel the intention that's behind it.
Yes, yeah. It's definitely. I think it's for me. The more I want to be an open book. I really like to. When I'm on stage, I think doing stand up, I feel like I could literally talk about any parts of my life. The more I get more comfortable on stage, because I think with stand-up comedy, it's like I always say to any young stand-up, the more comfortable you are on stage, the better comic you'll be, because you will feel the need to talk about things that sometimes pain and sometimes, but you've come full circle that you can now laugh at it. So
is that, because I'm quite interested in that. As a comedian, you do actually use a lot of you bare your soul on a comedy stage in a way 100%. That potentially you wouldn't in an interview. Yeah,
because in stand-up, it's massively exposing. I go out there and just have a mic. There's no DJ or backup singers and you got to remember as well with an audience, they want to hear new stuff. They don't want to hear if you're a musician, you can play the hits. People go to concerts and they want to hear that. Whereas if I play the O2 and I'm doing this big tour and I've charged £70 a ticket, they're like, I've seen you before, now I want this new stuff. So I think as a comic,
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, so as a comic, you have to. It's like when I was young, like in my 20s, and I started doing stand up, I tried to be very cool because I was like, I'm playing a lot to my peers. So I was like, I didn't even use my name. I was using Mo the comedian, which was like, I don't want him to know my actual real name because I'm trying to be the cool comic here. And I think it's until I met my manager, Polly, and she sat me down. And this was before she was my manager. She was a producer in TV and I was working on a show called Yard Party. And she was like, so what's your name? And I was like, well, my name's Mo Gilligan. She said, why don't you just use that? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, you should, just your name. Like that's your name. Just, like, if you can write it down on something, there's no difference for when you're on stage. And then through that, I remember we was speaking, had a conversation, and she was like, so where's like your parents from, your dad and stuff? So I was like, my dad's Rastafarian and stuff. She said, you ever spoke about some of this on stage? And I was like, well, no. And she's like, but this is so interesting. I just met you and this is really interesting. And I think that was the start of me really kind of letting my hair down and being myself on stage.
And did that feel scary?
It did feel scary at first, but the more I owned it and I was talking about real experiences, it made it easier to write.
Yes.
Because I'm writing from truth.
Experience, yeah.
And you're not, I think sometimes people know when you're trying to be too cool.
Yes.
They can see it.
Totally. Well, I hate this word because everybody's banding it about but authenticity.
Yeah, yeah.
It's absolutely transparent. Like you can totally feel if somebody's not true.
Yeah.
Or mean it, or if somebody's, like you said, on stage and they're making up a story, but it's not real.
Yeah, and I think it's, for me as a stand-up, it's really owning my truths on stage. And what, especially as the more success you get, there's people who really want to have an insight into your life, and I think it's learning that on stage a little bit as well.
Is that causing any trouble with your family though, or with anybody that you talk about? Because sometimes I watch and I think, even though it's kind of been slightly embellished, like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, I think for me, like, when I was on stage, I've got this joke where I come on stage and I say, like, I love my mum, but sometimes mums are dickheads. Nice. And that, I remember I used to start my set with that. And then I would explain, I said, no, but sometimes mums do dickhead things. Then I explain, when you go to a supermarket as a kid and you want something and your mum puts that back. Your mum's like, no, put that back, I can't afford that. So I'd walk off and I'm like, oh, this dickhead woman. And the thing is, I remember doing that, and especially when I was doing it at a lot of black comedy shows, a lot of black comedy shows, seeing this young guy go on stage and it's like, what? This guy is disrespecting his mum. Yo, you can't say that. And I'm like, no, it's just jokes, isn't it? It's comedy. And the thing is, I remember, like, I would never say it knowing that my mum would watch it and be like, oh, is that what you really think of me?
Yes.
Because my mum has always inspired my comedy as well. So she would laugh. She'd be the first one to laugh at that. But yeah, 100%. Sometimes when you talk about, your family or real experiences and friends, you are sometimes treading on thin ice, because as much as everyone's laughing, you haven't really asked the person who the joke is about. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've written this joke recently about me and the guys going to Vegas, and I've told this joke twice on stage now, but at the same time, there's a part of me where, and it's funny because friends are like, you gotta tell this. This is hilarious. That story, you need to tell it. But every part of me is like, yeah, but I don't know if everyone finds it funny. And I think with comedy, you have to really...
But I think the thing with you, Mo, is that, like, you haven't even told me what the story is, and I start laughing because you describing yourself wanting to tell the story but feeling bad about telling the story already has made me laugh, and I don't even know what the story is. No.